Jane Velez Mitchell for Jane Unchained Live Talk with Michael Zelniker, who is the local co-chair of the LA chapter of the Climate Reality Project, which was founded by former Vice President Al Gore, and he is still involved in that. We are talking today about this absolutely astounding and, to me, horrifying plan to bulldoze the last remaining sliver of wetlands in Los Angeles. It's called the Ballona Wetlands, and it's 600 plus acres. And there is a plan now to spend hundreds of millions of dollars and 9 years bulldozing the whole thing when it's home to thousands of wild animals who are thriving right now. Michael, can you explain why you are in opposition to this project?
Well, wetlands are such an important carbon sequester. As we face the implications of climate change, the climate crisis, the idea that we're going to excavate all this land, 600 acres of land, as we upset all this soil, we release all this carbon that is sequestered inside the soil, the trees, the shrubs, the plants. All of this life that sequesters all this carbon is going to be released into the atmosphere unnecessarily. Part of the plan also is to build a parking structure and all these bike paths. Nobody has estimated in the environmental, what's it called, the EIR, in this report, nobody has estimated how much constructing, building this parking structure and these bike paths, how much, what's the carbon footprint from all of this construction. So we're generally opposed to this. The Playa del Rey gas storage facility is where SoCalGas stores gas that's coming in from Oklahoma and Texas. This is all underneath the Ballona Wetlands and all surrounding the Ballona Wetlands. So we are in general opposed to these gas storage plants. We must get off of fossil fuels, and we must do so as quickly as possible. Now, if we allow this so-called restoration, this excavation of the Ballona Wetlands to go forward, it's just going to make it harder for us to do what we need to do, which is to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. And if you see me looking down, it's because I am tweeting this out. And so I would urge everyone watching, share it out, tweet it out, spread it out, because a lot of people don't know about this. And I am personally, not just as the founder of Jane Unchained News Network, which issued an editorial against this project, but as somebody who lives right near the Ballona Wetlands and who on a daily basis sees the thriving wetlands, am horrified to see that, for example, Heal the Bay, which we reached out to for comment, I haven't heard back last I checked, but they're invited on any time, as is SoCalGas, has supported this. And Heal the Bay is an environmental organization. Now, to me, you don't pave paradise and put up a parking lot. The 600 plus acres that exist there right now are home to thousands of endangered, special status animals, as well as just wild animals. And obviously, if you bulldoze their home, they're not going to have anywhere to go. This is it. This is the last remaining sliver of wetlands. Additionally, for the migratory bird population that travels south and stops here, this is one of the few places they can stop. They can't stop at the Santa Monica Pier, okay? They stop here at a pristine, quiet place where they can nest, they can thrive, they can eat, they can flourish. Where do all these thousands of wild animals come into the equation, and what would likely happen to them if this project goes through? And consider, it could take years to make it happen. So it's years of disruption.
Jane, the other aspect to this is, we all remember well the Aliso Canyon blowout that caused all kinds of health issues for all the people living anywhere in a certain radius to Aliso Canyon. The Ballona Wetlands actually has approximately 500,000 people that live within a 5-mile radius of the Playa del Rey facility. So the idea that they're going to allow all of this heavy equipment that's going to be used to bulldoze hundreds of acres of land, disrupting millions of tons of soil, destroying plants and trees, all instruments of very effective carbon sequestration. Bulldozing this ecosystem, moving the soil, will result in the release of untold metric tons of sequestered carbon. But what worries me more than anything is allowing this heavy construction equipment to roam around this area, tearing up the ground, shaking the earth immediately over and around this aging gas storage facility, all this infrastructure. So this gas storage facility was actually first developed in 1942. That's almost 80 years ago. These gas storage facilities, their life expectancy is approximately 50 years. So we're way outside that normal range, which makes this gas storage facility that much more vulnerable to any kind of accident. So allowing all this heavy construction equipment to roam around this area, tearing up the ground, shaking the earth immediately over and around this aging gas storage infrastructure, is that a risk we're willing to take? You know, just a couple of years after what happened in Aliso Canyon, with a much, much larger population base, LAX is about 3 miles away. This is a risk that we should not be willing to take.
We are being joined now by another expert who, Roy, will you identify yourself, your name and your affiliation? And we want to get your take on, we're talking about the plan to bulldoze LA's last wetlands. You might say, oh my God, you know, why on earth would we want to do that when there are thousands of wild animals, some endangered, some threatened, some special status, some just wild animals thriving? I just saw 2 geese, a mating pair, fly overhead this morning. Where will those geese go if they don't have a landing area? So Roy, hopefully we got your audio. Tell us who you are, who you represent, and what your thoughts are on this project to bulldoze the Ballona Wetlands.
Thank you. This is Roy Vander Hoek, and I am a scientist, wildlife science, conservation biology, marine biology, geographer as well. I'm the president of the Ballona Institute and have been involved in studying and researching the Ballona Wetlands in Los Angeles and greater Los Angeles in California for the last 20 plus years. Academically trained at Cal State Northridge, worked in federal agencies as a wildlife biologist and archaeologist, and interested to help here with saving our Ballona Wetlands.
Well, what is your objection to this plan to bulldoze the wetlands?
So there's a flora and fauna that's intact here and thriving, very important ecology going on here, contrary to what you'll hear here the Bay say, or other scientists who have money in the game to kind of bastardizing the science, because there's endangered species present. There's 200 species of birds that are here each year. Some are migratory, some are nesting. We have an intact reptile or herpetofauna, frogs, amphibians. We have a rare lizard. We have the Canada goose that you mentioned. Some are even saying, well, that's not a wild natural goose. It's an urbanized goose. Well, it's not true. It's definitely wild. It's just choosing not to migrate anymore. At Yellowstone National Park, for example, Canada goose don't migrate. That's not a variable. And the Canada goose has been increasing throughout LA, but they're still in a delicate balance. The importance of geese present is also as a prey. That means we might get the golden eagle back here as well, which is a predator of geese. The linkages to nature here, the ecology, just as you've heard Michael say, you know, it's all connected. And I haven't even addressed carbon sequestration or carbon storage. We have a vast amount of woodlands in the Ballona Wetlands. We have willow woodlands.
Why do you think this is happening? Why? I'm personally connected to this story because 2 decades ago, I was a reporter at KCAL TV, and I interviewed Martin Sheen and indigenous peoples who were marching against the development of Playa Vista, which is the giant development which adjoins the Ballona Wetlands, right at Jefferson, beginning at Jefferson and Lincoln. And I went across the street and I talked to the developers of Playa. I talked to the top people as a reporter, and they said, don't worry, we will preserve the wetlands. Yes, we're doing this development, but we're doing it, and we're going to take this other 600 acres. I don't know if they used the exact phrase 600 acres, but they said this whole other wetlands that remains, and it will remain pristine. I promise you that. Now, I'm not saying that Playa is the one doing this, and they're invited on too. I mean, they're joining this whole thing. But what I am saying is it was developed with the understanding that there would be a sizable piece of land that was left for wildlife that would remain untouched. And so why is this changing now, Michael?
I'm speculating a little bit, but my sense is that probably the primary beneficiary of this project will be SoCalGas.
That's correct.
Because so much of their infrastructure is aging and has to be upgraded because of the risks associated with degrading storage facility infrastructure, that when all of this excavation is developed and executed, all of their infrastructure is going to get exposed. So they're going to have an opportunity basically on the public dime to upgrade their infrastructure when we, the public, are paying for this so-called restoration, what I call a so-called restoration. So when all of this gets dug up, when all the Ballona wetland, these acres of land where their infrastructure resides underneath the ground, when it gets dug up, it's going to get exposed. They're going to get an opportunity for free to upgrade their infrastructure. Roy, am I speculating in a way that sounds logical?
It's not speculation, it's accurate. The gas company has been allowed into the secret government meetings on the restoration, whereas the public hasn't been able to be present. The gas company's hoping to get huge numbers, millions of dollars as restoration side money in order to upgrade their facilities. And we don't want to have gas. And by the way, most of the gas is sold wholesale at low rates to Chevron and Edison. And so Chevron and Edison have been involved with Heal the Bay as well, and with giving monies and giving special privileges for Chevron employees, mothers and their daughters, to go on a tour of the wetland through the lock gates, sponsored by Heal the Bay. And so I was allowed to attend because I heard about it indirectly through our sources and observed what was going on in that respect. And so Heal the Bay has 20 years ago, when we were fighting Playa Vista, they were reluctant to join in. They finally came close to joining, but not officially. And what's that about? So Heal the Bay has been receiving money. They have their hands in the cookie jar. The past executive director, Mark Gold, and the current executive director, Shelley Luce, both were trained at UCLA under Dr. Ambrose. And
I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on this. By the way, we did seek comment from Heal the Bay, and they're invited on anytime. But I'm holding a document where it says it right on their website. They're in favor of this. Here is the Heal the Bay. I got this right off the website, and essentially they're saying alternative one, which is, according to the people I've spoken to, the most extreme. Okay, there's several alternatives, the most extreme, and I would like you to respond to this. This is from Heal the Bay, will best achieve the goals, increase public access for education, and let me get it right here. Heal the Bay is interested, sorry, give me 1 second here. The restoration of the Ballona wetlands, the restoration of the Ballona wetlands should restore, enhance, and create functioning wetland habitats that are resilient and self-sustaining and provide benefits for native species, as well as increased public access for education and enjoyment. Specifically, the restoration plan must include removal of significant amounts of legacy fill and sediment that has been placed on the wetlands, causing severe impairment of natural wetlands functions, removal of concrete levees along the Ballona Creek to reconnect the creek to its floodplains in the wetlands, restoration and or creation of wetland habitats, including subtidal low marsh, mid and high marsh, and salt pan habitats, wetland habitats that support diverse, rare, and sensitive species of plants and animals. Now, this is what the Heal the Bay is saying is the reason why they support this so-called restoration that critics say is really a destruction and excavation. So I would like both of you to respond to what you're hearing now. This is their argument. They're saying that they're essentially going to support diverse, rare, and sensitive species. Now, there are diverse, rare, and sensitive species of plants and animals, thousands of them living there right now,
Correct.
who would be displaced and likely die if 600 plus acres is excavated. So how do you explain that they're supporting the excavation? I mean, what reasonable explanation, and saying they want to foster animals who are already living there prior to the excavation and who certainly are going to be displaced at the very least and very likely die if the whole place is bulldozed. Can either of you address that? Michael, let's start with you.
Well, you know, to me, the larger goal is to get this storage facility shut down. These gas storage facilities must be shut down. They are dangerous, especially ones that are aging like the Playa del Rey one. So the idea that we're going to build this new infrastructure that's going to cost millions and millions of dollars, that to me suggests it's going to make it less likely that we're going to be able to shut down this gas storage facility. So the larger goal in my mind is getting it shut down. And the idea that we're going to spend tens of millions of dollars on this so-called restoration, to me, is going to make it much, much less likely that we're going to be able to get it shut down. The other point for me is, you know, I've yet to see any evidence where man can do a better job restoring a natural habitat than nature itself. Many of those who are in favor of the so-called restoration project have never even spent time wandering through the Ballona Wetlands. Ballona is already a naturally functioning wetland that, with the right kind of care, would flourish beyond what we can imagine. The kind of care that is available for a fraction of the cost and with none of the risks or environmentally catastrophic consequences. And that's why we stand firmly against this SoCal gas supported so-called restoration project. Roy?
Yes, thanks, Michael. And I agree with you, and I can only supplement and complement what you're saying and bring up two organizations based on what Jane was saying a moment ago. You can see that access is something they're trying to brag about, that they're going to bring back more access for the public. And the other is that they're going to increase the biodiversity. And both of those things are false. It's double speak. For example, an expert on wildlife in Los Angeles is the Los Angeles Audubon Society, not just focused on birds, but butterflies and all the species that connect together. And Los Angeles Audubon Society is opposed to the restoration. But the president and the board of directors have spoken openly about being against it. And the president of Los Angeles Audubon, Dr. Margot Griswold, a restoration expert, has been saying that as well from her own voice. And then Sierra Club, who we all know is really important for open space and access to nature and hiking, and that Sierra Club is opposed to the restoration project because they know there's already a lot of access there. We're interested in keeping the rowing of the universities being there, people canoeing and kayaking in the Ballona River. I prefer to call it a river or even use the Spanish, Rio Ballona. And then there's the access trails. Once a month, there's an open house that Audubon has that allows everybody to walk in a portion of the Ballona wetlands, with much of it in the sand dune habitat and grassland habitat. If you remove all the grassland and sand dune habitat and woodland habitat from our wetlands ecosystem, then you're making it inaccessible, because those are the kinds of areas that they can that the public can walk. There's a ready-made trail that's just been built, but they won't open it. The state of California, linked into Governor Gavin Newsom, isn't putting a push on his agency to open up that walking trail. And then our bicycle path and walking trail along the bicycle path goes right through the heart of the wetlands, beautifully allowing people to be up close and see the entire ecological reserve on the elevated levee of the river. And those levees are providing flood protection, and they've become part of the equilibrium of the ecology, with more than 30 kinds of fish and many kinds of waterfowl that are feeding on those fish, and just a whole biodiversity associated with the river itself, a type of special wetland and estuary. And so it really is doublespeak and talking out of two sides of the mouth, both heal the bay, and even our government agency that's the manager of the Ballona. It's a state ecological reserve under the Department of Fish and Wildlife, who's also in a line of chain of command to the California Fish and Game Commission, 5 commissioners. They voted 20 years ago to make this an ecological reserve. Now we're into a new group of commissioners, and they don't see it the same way. Many of them are holdovers from Jerry Brown and have been on the commission for some time. So we need some changes there, including the executive director of the Department of Fish and Wildlife, Chuck Bonin. I'm dropping a name there for everybody to try to get to learn who he is. And he's been, I think, getting some lectures now from the governor that he's not doing the right things. Okay.
Well, I don't want to get personal, and anybody mentioned here is invited on any time. We're dialoguing about this. And so, you know, anybody who's mentioned, this is look, the animals can't speak for themselves. Today, I was outside wearing a mask, which of course is something that I have to do as well as everybody around the world now because of the abuse of wild animals. And that's another reason why we need to look at this very carefully. The new watchwords from the experts, the epidemiologists and the biologists, are leave wildlife alone.
Correct.
That's the solution to preventing future viruses. But anyway, I looked up and I saw 2 geese, a mating pair, fly overhead. They are the wetlands right there. Where are those geese going to go if we have a multi-year excavation of the entire thing on the grounds that we're going to restore it and that we're going to provide public access? Now, I've lived here since 1990. Once again, I covered the protests when I was a reporter at KCAL, where Martin Sheen and indigenous people marched against any development of this wetlands because it is also a sacred Native American burial ground.
Correct, yes. Okay?
So that's one of the reasons why when I saw this, I was in shock, because they promised me to my face 20 years ago, approximately, these wetlands will remain pristine. Now we've got organizations saying, well, we've got to restore them. Restore them from what? Okay, nature responds to the changes man makes. Yes, there have been some changes, man-made changes. Notably, SoCal Gas has pipes and wells underneath it. That doesn't mean that nature wasn't able to adapt to that. To wit, right now, we have a thriving set of wildlife in this last remaining strip of wetlands in Los Angeles. And it is a landing place for migratory birds. It is home to more than 200 different species of birds, as well as small mammals. Can you give us an idea of some of the animals, Roy, that would be impacted if this plan goes through? Oh, yes. Let me put you back in and make you full screen. Thank you. Okay.
Well, you've summarized it quite well, Jane. Some of the examples are a special bird called the white-tailed kite, a special type of hawk that's small and is there every year at Ballona Wetlands. And we've known about them nesting since the 50s there. And they feed on small mammals, native mammals that are in the marsh and the grassland. This one example. There are several endangered species on the United States federal endangered species list. The Belding Savannah sparrow nests at Ballona, and the numbers have been increasing over the last few decades because we've been carefully keeping the habitat intact. There's Alisbel's vireo, a migratory songbird that comes north from Mexico in the springtime to nest at Ballona, then returns in the fall back to Mexico and crosses through international borders, of course, to do that. And it's nesting only in the last few years at Ballona in willows along our Ballona River and other marshlands adjoining there. It feeds on insects. There's 2 songbirds there. There's a legless lizard, a fantastic nickname, the silverly legless lizard, and Aniella pulchra, and has been split into 5 species in California. And one of those species is now found only in our LAX sand dunes and the Ballona sand dunes as 2 intact habitats. So I could go on and on. I found and the LA Times reported on a golden bush, a rare plant that I found, the Palmer golden bush, in part of the Ballona Wetlands in the sand dune habitat. And so there's the flora, and there's approximately 200 species of native plants there, and that should not be overlooked. And so Hilde Bay or the agencies are saying there's non-native plants there that have to be eradicated. But everywhere we look in California, even the same state agency identifies the annual grassland as really important to wildlife habitat. And it's in a balance with many non-native species and native species together.
I think you're making some excellent points. Michael, what can we do to stop this? It sounds like some people are treating it as a fait accompli. Obviously, this is taxpayer money that's going to be used. Millions. How expensive is this? And what can average people do who are like, wait a second, we don't need this? In fact, you could make the environmental racism argument. This is a very Tony neighborhood now, okay? This is Silicon Beach. That's what they call it. And to create more bike paths when we have more bike paths than we know what to do with. I've lived here since 1990. So I know I could bike for 50, 60 miles without ever having to stop, going up and down the coast. And additionally, there is already a bike path through the Ballona Wetlands. I have been on it, and it's also a hiking path, and it works quite well. So the idea that we need to provide more bike paths, there's a bike path right there. I walked on it. It's a bike and hiking path to get to the protests that occurred against this project. So what can people do? What's the strategy for stopping this?
Well, Roy's organization, the Ballona Institute, is really spearheading the initiative to get this stopped. So I'm going to defer to Roy primarily, but generally speaking, the Climate Reality Project, when we engage something on a level like this, the constituents that are primarily involved. So I'll give you an example. Last year, over a period of about 7 months, we worked with LAUSD, the second largest school district in the country, 700,000 students, 28,000 teachers, about 30,000 support staff. We worked with them to pass a resolution unanimously, I might add, to transition all of their energy needs to 100% clean, renewable sources on a timeline that is more aggressive than the city, county, and state. Now, who is the primary constituent of public school district? The students. So we worked through, we have a bunch of LAUSD teachers and students and parents who came on board as coalition partners for our initiative. And we ignited the students in all these various schools. There are 1,100 LAUSD schools, and we went out to as many schools as we could, and we ignited this population, this constituent population. And the reason why we were able to have success with the school district that has very, very limited budgetary resources, they run a budget deficit almost every year. And we were able to get them to pass this very aggressive plan to transition all of their energy needs to 100% clean, renewable sources. So we could only do this by igniting, activating the constituents of the stakeholders of this of LAUSD. So in that sense, what we need to do is people in the neighborhood need to be ignited. People who have some a connection to the Ballona wetlands, organizations that are involved on an environmental basis, EJ groups, environmental justice groups, our elected officials tend to listen, at least give lip service to listening to our environmental justice groups. So in that sense, we want to not only bring on the traditional environmental organizations like the Sierra Club and Climate Reality Project, Ballona Institute, but we also want to bring on board and make sure that these voices of these marginalized communities represented by organizations like Communities for a Better Environment, Pacoima Beautiful. These are the organizations that we want to bring into this coalition in order to raise our voices and have optimal impact. Roy?
I agree with you. And so far, I have, as groups that are in opposition to it, Climate Reality Project, which is your project, Ballona Institute, which is Roy project. You said, and I'm taking your word for it, the LA Audubon Society, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I can't independently confirm Sierra Club where they stand, but we'll work on that, as well as In Defense of Animals. My news organization, which is a nonprofit, issues
Food and Water Watch.
I'm against it. Clean Water Watch.
Food and Water Watch.
Food and Water. Oh wait, are those two organizations?
Food and Water Watch now also has Action in their name. Food and Water Action. It's one organization.
Food and Water Action Watch?
No, you don't say both words. I either watch or action. They're
okay,
kind of
so Food and Water Watch. So there's a growing coalition. Somebody needs to be in charge of this coalition, though, for it to become effective. So, Roy, since your organization is possibly, Green Dream Campaign. Yes, Molly Baszler of the Green Dream Campaign, and we're going to have her on soon to talk about this. So we've got quite a group of people who, in terms of organizations, there's quite a few organizations. Playa Now. So Playa Now is also, according to Molly, I don't know if you can confirm that. I don't want to just throw names out without confirming with them. But suffice it to say that there's a lot of organizations that are in opposition to this. We need to really create a coalition. And I know that when the Neighborhood Council of Westchester Playa held a meeting about a month and a half ago, 45 people approximately showed up in opposition to this plan. And they were the overwhelming majority of people at the hearing. There were a couple of people who spoke in favor of it, the Fish and Wildlife representative, as well as a representative that people said had connections to the oil industry. So
Edison.
Yeah. So, where do we go from here, Robert? Because even though I understand this is a live feed and people are watching, people want to know, well, if they're watching and they're like, this is terrible, why are they ripping up the wetlands, the last wetlands, leaving thousands of hawks and, owls? We know that there are owls there. There are two species of owls. There are herons. There are egrets. There are obviously geese and ducks and lizards and foxes and all of these animals who cannot speak for themselves. And if they say this is wrong, it's wrong from a climate change perspective. We need to keep this untouched so that we can sequester carbon. It's wrong from a fossil fuels perspective because Los Angeles has said it wants to move away from fossil fuels. It's wrong from an animal welfare perspective because thousands of animals will be killed likely. It's certainly an argument we can make. Where are these animals going to go? If there's a, let's just use, for example, a squirrel out there, where are they going to go? Okay, maybe squirrels can survive a little better in urban wildlife, but in urban areas, but a fox, a raccoon? No. So where are they going to go? Nowhere. There's nowhere for them to go. Where are they going to go? Costco or Home Depot?
Right. So Roy, if I'm not mistaken, City Council member Mike Bonin is the representative in this area, correct?
Correct.
And he is against this restoration, so-called restoration, correct?
That's correct.
Right.
Well, he's actually neutral on the restoration against the gas company being there any longer. So that you can see how that's hinged together, though. And yeah, so there's a list of groups that we can provide. Jane, you gave a really good summary. And the Sierra Club website will tell you that. Now, the Ballona Institute considers themselves being in a partnership and a collaboration. We're not the sole group saving the wetlands or working to protect the wetlands. That Playa Now that you heard Molly mention to you is a collaboration, and that's an interesting one where Councilman Mike Bonin, Food and Water Watch, and the Ballona Institute are a tri-partnership. Indivisible Now, a progressive democratic organization. The Los Angeles County Democratic Party, the second largest Democratic Party in the state of California, has taken a position against bulldozing. I like to throw in dredging as well, the Ballona Wetlands, and that position goes back at least 10 years or so. So we have approximately 10 Democratic clubs in the Los Angeles area that have written strong letters saying they're against the restoration, against the bulldozing. Everybody's in realizing, and as Michael pointed out, nature, and I pointed out yesterday as well, and in Australia, they get the picture that you can't do restoration in 1 month, 1 year. It's a longer process that takes time. And this new idea coming out of England called rewilding, and now is capturing attention in America and the rest of the world, is rewilding our different parts of our countries. And this is an excellent place to do that. And what better place to do that where 8 million people and can be connected into watching the rewilding happening.
What I'd like to state is that the thing that I find, most, I would say, increase public access for education and enjoyment. Now, let me just say this. Destroying a habitat is no education, okay? That's for sure. And as far as enjoyment, if we really wanted to help the people of Los Angeles, we would put green spaces in their areas where they live, okay? As opposed to presuming that inner city kids, who I certainly believe need more green space, are going to drive and use the 300 space parking garage and then whip out their bikes and go on the bike trails, okay? That's a fantasy. If we really wanted to help inner city kids have a green experience, we would put greenery where they live, okay? There are plenty of bike paths here. And anybody who wants to bike, I've told you, I've biked from Temescal Canyon down to Manhattan Beach and back, and you can do even more. That's where I just get tired. I can't do anymore. But there are plenty of bike paths already in existence here in the coastal area. What we need are more bike paths in the inner cities and more green spaces in the inner cities and more gardens in the inner cities. Imagine if you took this, some people say it's $250 million project, and you diverted that money to creating green spaces and community gardens and bike paths in areas where people live.
This idea of rewilding really, in its simplest terms, just means eliminating human activity from an area. At the end of the wonderful Netflix series, Our Planet, they closed the series, this 8-part series, by going back to Chernobyl, where human beings have been told for about 10,000 years because of the nuclear fallout that remains there, we must not go there for any protracted period of time. And what's happened over these 30 years, as human beings are no longer, resident there, is this amazing ecosystem, a much more biodiverse ecosystem has sprung up in these 30 years since the nuclear disaster. So the filmmakers, I think, are trying to say, if we want nature to reassume its position, to take back the planet, so to speak, just eliminate human beings from the process. So nature doesn't need our help to restore itself. All it needs us to do is to get out of the way, and it will restore itself all on its own.
Right.
I think that's a great way to end this really fascinating conversation.
May I chime in?
Yes, absolutely.
Because you mentioned 2 owls, and so being a wildlife biologist, I can't help but want to say there's 2 more owls, and these 2 owls are coming back. So the burrowing owl is the 3rd owl that was there previously and has now been showing up for the last 10 plus years as a migrant coming in. But our goal is to have the burrowing owl. It's one of our smallest owls of the world, and it's a daytime hunting owl, not nighttime. And it's been coming back every winter, fall, winter, and then departs in the spring. But we want to have it back year round. And another owl, the short-eared owl, has just been periodically showing up, but because we have grasslands, we might be able to have that owl nest, or at least have 1 or 2 nesting pairs in the future. And the 2 owls that we do have that are the great horned owl and the barn owl. So that's 4 species of owls that you have a chance of seeing if you come to the Ballona Wetlands. I just wanted to chime in that little bit of wildlife and the rewilding concept and the nature healing herself. And the environmental impact report of the government doesn't talk about what I've just mentioned about the owls. It doesn't talk about the habitats becoming more vibrant each day that goes by as nature is slowly healing herself from the era of heavy chemical use and from DDT to others in LA.
Yeah, and I think that this is the first of many conversations. I want to thank you both. I know you're both very busy for taking the time to talk. We here at Jane Unchained News Network cover issues that are often overlooked by mainstream media. Right now, it's coronavirus and nothing else. So we're able to get, and this does have a coronavirus connection in that, as I mentioned, the biologists and the epidemiologists are saying, leave nature alone, stop tinkering with it. That's where a close-up contact between humans and wild animals is where these zoonotic diseases jump from animals to humans.
Correct.
And so that's another argument. What I would like to say is that obviously there is a plan to do this. So in order to stop it, there has to be a plan to stop it. And what the arms of those plans are coordination, creating a coalition. We've listed all these groups, but is there an umbrella coalition? I don't believe there is. Please correct me if I'm wrong. If not, we need to create an umbrella coalition. There is strength in numbers. Number two, I think we need to look at the legal aspects here. This is taxpayer money at a time where people are losing their jobs left and right, and we're going into economic crisis. We're in economic crisis. And so I think that there's also an opportunity to look at it from that perspective. And I don't know if there are lawyers involved and where a coalition could check out legal issues. And the third arm is the media arm, getting public aware of this, which is where we come in to just at least start this conversation. And I want to say we invite Heal the Bay, SoCal Gas, and anybody else who was mentioned in this broadcast, any entity or individual on any time, we would love to dialogue with you. And so you have a standing invitation. You just call me or email me at Jane Unchained. We did reach out to Heal the Bay for a statement, but on their website, they are very forthright about being aggressively in favor of the bulldozing and the excavation of the Ballona Wetlands. And they're calling it a restoration. Critics say that is Orwellian doublespeak. It is not a restoration. It is a destruction. So with that, I want to say thank you so much, gentlemen. And this is the first of many. We will be creating that coalition, and we will come back to you with more on how you can get involved. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you, Jane. Great to be with you.
Thank you. Bye.